Hello and welcome to another episode of Film Club. I'm Chris Garner, joined with my co-host Tate in the Hour, and today we're going to be discussing the science fiction thriller from earlier this year, Ex Machina, directed by Alex Garland. For any of you new to our Film Club series, how it basically works is that at the end of each of our main shows, we take it in turns nominating a film to review for this show now. And it has to be vaguely affiliated with whatever we reviewed at the time. Now, for this week, we didn't actually end with a recommended movie because our Star Wars trailer breakdown, which is also on our channel if you want to check that out, that was sort of an impromptu one. And at the time, I don't think we knew that was going to be this week's main show. But Tate, it was your decision to pick a film this week, and you picked earlier today, so give us a couple of reasons why you picked Ex Machina.
So I saw this film first off going to America on a plane, and I thought, I've heard good things about this film. I heard the Commode review, and he seemed to like it. I thought, I'll go for a sci-fi thriller. Haven't seen a good one in a long time, and not only that, but the link between Star Wars and Ex Machina is in multiple different levels. They're both sci-fi films. They both came out this year, I guess. And then we got Domhnall Gleeson and Oscar Isaac, who are both going to be in Star Wars.
Yeah, so. And obviously the casting director, or J.J. Abrams, Kathleen Kennedy, who's doing Star Wars, must have seen this movie and saw their performances in it. I can only imagine that they must have, considering that both of them were in this and now they're in Star Wars. We've got a lot to talk about in this one, I think, especially with those two people in particular. But as always with our reviews, we'll start off with a spoiler-free section, so you haven't got to worry about spoilers right now. We'll give you a warning when we get into spoilers, but that'll be much later into the review. So let's jump straight into it then. So thoughts before going in. You just mentioned that you saw this on a plane. I can't remember what film I was in at the cinema, but I remember I got a trailer for this film and instantly I thought, oh, this looks like... Because I love films like this with artificial intelligence and robotics and everything like that. I'm always fascinated by that kind of stuff. And I saw the trailer and I thought it looked absolutely fantastic, but for whatever reason or not, I didn't actually manage to get to the cinema to see it. I don't know if it was... I don't think it got a huge screening at my local cinema. The times were very weird and it was difficult for me to get to. So I really just saw this a couple of months after it was released on DVD and Blu-ray, and we'll go into like basic thoughts in a minute, but I was just blown away by it. I don't know if you were the same when you first saw it.
No, it completely shocked me, and as soon as I landed in the US, I quite basically booked a ticket online to go see it at my local cinema like 3 weeks later, even though I had a whole holiday to go through afterwards. I was like, okay, I've seen this on a tiny screen, I need to see this in a proper big cinema, and I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah, because with this film as well, this was, it was a pretty small budget film. It was done on a budget of 15 mil, and it was the director Alex Garland's first directorial, I think it was his directorial debut. I'm just checking now.
It made double, didn't it?
Yeah, it made double. It had a good crowd. I think that in a few years, give it a few years, this could be like a cult film that people talk about, especially now Star Wars is coming out. I think people, if they're looking into the casting of it more and seeing their previous work, I think this is going to be one that they go back to. I'm just checking now. Alex Garland, he was mostly a screenplay writer, to be honest. He did the screenplay for Dread, 28 Days, 28 Weeks Later, and Sunshine as well. So, he's done sci-fi before, and he's done these smaller budget films as well. Dread was a small budget, so was 28 Days Later, etc. And it was also produced by Film 4 as well, and you were saying earlier that you always like the films that Film 4 produce, and it's refreshing to see. I mean, we all love these big budget ones that come out, the big budget epics like Mad Max, Jurassic World, whatever, but I do like these smaller films as well, especially because so many of them just sort of drop under the radar, but when you go back and watch them, you really realise how good they actually are.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I feel that all films from Film 4, I've enjoyed every single one of them, even like the dumb ones like In-Betweeners movies and stuff like that. They've all just kind of had that Britishness behind them. They've all just inspired, like, I don't know, it sparked something in me. It sparked the Britishness in me to just like their movies.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for anyone that hasn't seen Ex Machina, the brief plot is that a programmer is invited by his employer and to administer a thing called the Turing test, which is a test to see whether an artificial intelligence can convince you that it is human. And he goes up there, and maybe his employer isn't all that he seems, and maybe the AI isn't either. It's difficult to go into in depth because I would literally spoil the entire movie, but it definitely earns the title of being a thriller, I think, because there are a lot of tense moments in this film, and the characterizations, and we'll go into this a bit now with all the characters, are absolutely fascinating. Your main character is a character called Caleb, played by Domhnall Gleeson. I hadn't really seen many of his projects before this, but his character is sort of the naive, plucky employer, really, isn't it? Not employee, sorry.
He makes me feel like a student at university. They just
Yeah.
go off and do all the different clubs, just get involved with everything. They'll sign up to any old art, any old experiment that the lecturers want them to do, just because they want to kind of progress through their field. They want to get their name out there.
Yeah, and I mean, the film starts off, you don't really get much backstory of him. It pretty much just throws you straight into the plot of him travelling up to his employer's house, which is a very remote location it's like forests and mountains, isn't it? But it starts off, and he's basically sort of an employee at Google, really, isn't it? This is set. I don't know if the exact date's set. I think we're just meant to assume that it's in the not too distant
The
future. It's
company's
definitely
called Blue Book, which is the
Yeah.
world's most popular search engine. So basically, Google.
Yeah, and that whole search engine thing's used later on in the film when the employer's talking about what he's searched and everything like that. But Domhnall Gleeson's performance in this, I think that he's a great actor. The character, I don't want to say is underwritten, but as we said, he's this very plucky and sort of wide-eyed guy, isn't he? There's not really much else to him, but if we get into the other character, the other main character, Nathan, played by Oscar Isaac, wow, his performance in this film has made me very excited to see what he's going to be like in the new Star Wars film. He's really built himself up in this film as well, if you look at him,
And he looks old.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a full-on beard. I mean, that's not spoiling anything because you can see him in the trailers with he looks 40.
Yeah,
He's
and that really adds a lot to the character because we know that he's sort of this weathered, I don't want to say socially inept, but he keeps himself to himself. You see that he's a heavy drinker each night. He likes to party, but he looks weathered. He looks aged, as you said. And I mean, I knew the cast of all the new Star Wars film ages ago when they were first announced, and it never clicked even while watching this film. I think it was like halfway through the film, and I was sort of like checking on Wikipedia, like the cast and everything. I was like, oh god, that's the one playing Poe Dameron in the new Star Wars film because they look completely
because his hair was
different.
switched?
I think his hair's switched. He looks more he looks more muscular in this movie. He looks older. His whole features look completely different. But I mean, his performance, and I don't want to go into it too much. The only way I can sort of describe it, if I'm going to compare him to another character, I got a lot of sort of Jack Torrance from Jack Nicholson's performance in The Shining. I don't know whether that plays into the whole feeling of isolation in the mountains, and he's the employer of the company. He's massively wealthy.
I'm going to give a different response, but I'm going to give it in the spoiler-filled section because I feel like this is what the underlying tone of the movie was meant to be.
Yeah, and right when Domhnall Gleeson's character is introduced to him, you know that this guy's not all right. And even if you haven't seen the trailer, you get that sense immediately from the very beginning. And when Oscar Isaacs is showing him round where he's going to be stopping with him, even the room and like the compound itself, it's really claustrophobic. There's no windows or anything like that. It's all very, and most of the film, in fact, apart from actually I don't want to go into that, but most of the film takes place in this building, and you do get that sense of isolation and the claustrophobic nature of it.
It feels like a Fly episode of a TV episode, those episodes, I know Breaking Bad did a very good one, which was just called Fly, where they were chasing a fly around the room for an entire episode.
Yeah.
It was all set in one space. That's very similar with this, it's very similar with Reservoir Dogs. You have one scene at the very start where it's set completely away from where the rest of the film will take place, and then the film will just continue in that one, it's very character-driven. It doesn't
Yeah, and
focus on like exterior events with other characters. It just focuses on these characters.
I mean that's a common factor with lower budget films as well, but so often the case that it just works completely in its favour. Because if this kept cutting out to the outside world, then I think you would have lost a massive sense of that. That's similar to The Shining as well. I know that there's an extended cut out there of The Shining, which I've only seen once when it gets broadcast on TV. But there are a lot of scenes that keep cutting away from the hotel, and you definitely lose that sense when you're away from it. I like that it keeps you in this building, and Oscar Isaac in it, as the story goes on, you learn. I've spoken about this on the channel before. I love scripts that are written like this, where as the main character is learning new stuff, so is the audience, and you sort of go on this journey with the character and uncover new stuff. But as the film goes on, you realise what a dark, twisted, and menacing man Nathan is, played by Oscar Isaac. He is fantastic in this film. And then there's another character in the film. Really, as you were saying, you sort of get three main characters, and they're the ones you follow most of it. There are a few other side characters and incidental characters, but your main three are Domhnall Gleeson, Oscar Isaac, and the one we haven't mentioned yet, Alicia Vikander, who plays Ava. She plays the artificial intelligence robot in the film. She's fantastic in this movie, and you read a bit about it. I know we're skipping ahead a bit, but the effects work on it as well. One of the things that struck me the most from seeing the trailer the first time was how the robot looked, because, I mean, we've seen so many of these kind of films before. I mean, ones that come to mind is AI itself, the Steven Spielberg movie, I, Robot as well with Will Smith, and robots are very difficult to sort of make look different all the time, especially when they're meant to be human-like. But what they do in this, it's fantastic. I mean, you see her head, but like the neck's exposed with all the mechanics, and sort of stomach is as well. And you read the effects work. I mean, on a small budget film, it looks absolutely fantastic. I mean, if this was a big budget film, this would probably have been done in motion capture or something like that. But I believe I was reading earlier that they filmed the shots twice, so that one with her on set and one without her on set. So on one take they had just the background, and on another one they had her in the frame. But they never actually had any full special effects shots. Everything was shot with her, and then they pasted over her with the special effects. And I mean, on this budget and to that scale, the effects look incredible. They're limited just to her, really, and there might be a few other shots as well of some of the robots ones later, but they just look great. And I think that if they hadn't have got the look of Ava right in this film, I think that a lot would have been lacking. And it's not just her. I mean, you see other artificial intelligence robots throughout the film, and they all look phenomenal as well. So and we haven't even I'll let you talk about her acting a bit, but I don't think I've seen her in any other film. I'm going to check it now while you sort of carry on this point.
I haven't seen her. I'm pretty sure that I have seen her in another film. I watched The Fifth Estate. Didn't really recognise her, and I know she's going to be later on this year in what's it called? The Danish Girl. She's a pretty unheard of actress. Other than that, I mean, she may be well known in the cinema world, but I haven't really seen many films with her in it, and I feel like this performance is very well done. I mean, I completely get her character. It's very well acted. It's a sense of mystery, but because she's trying to act out a human and a robot at the same time, like she's showing that she is a robot, like this machine, and yet she is also at the same time acting out the human side of things by having a human face, by showing like different facial expressions, which makes you question throughout the entire film.
Yeah, I mean, you question along with the main character as well, and that's what's so fascinating about her character. And it's not just sort of her relationship with Caleb, who takes a almost romantic liking to her, and even Oscar Isaac sort of calls him out on this in the film. But it's the relationship between the creator and the creation as well, which is always the most fascinating part with stuff like this. And that's very, very much brought to the forefront in this film. Again, I can't give too much away without spoiling the film, but we'll talk about more of that in the spoilers. But it is sort of a fantastic game of who's playing who. Is the robot to be believed? Or is Oscar Isaac actually true all the way through? or is he just as menacing as, you know, the robots that he claims that they are? You know, it's really complex, sort of the levels and layers of writing, and I do think it brings in a lot of themes of this whole creation and what it is to be human, which are all really common themes in films like this. I mean, it doesn't have to try anything new in this respect, but I think that what it does is that it's definitely probably, I'm trying to think back now, it probably is the best artificial intelligence film I have seen. I wasn't a big fan of the Steven Spielberg one. iRobot's just like a sort of fun action movie, but I think if this is what iRobot could have been, I think, and I think that the pace and the tone of this, it's very sort of, I won't say it's dark, but it's very somber, it's very bleak, it's very stark, and I like that about it because, you know, watching this film, and I don't know if it does sort of, I might be remembering it wrong. It's been a while since I've seen it, but does it do the sort of shining thing with the text screen that comes up certain days that go by? Is it, or is it like date and time to show how long it's like that? Each sort of part and each act of the film is clearly defined, and you really see this progression with the time that he's up there and the effect that that's having on all the characters. With whether it be Oscar Isaac and sort of his alcohol consumption and, you know, his discussions with Domhnall Gleeson, or whether it's Domhnall Gleeson learning more from Ava and trying to suss out whether she is actually, you know, can appear human or if she is doing it for her own ends. And it's really fantastic and fascinating to watch.
No, I completely agree. I mean, my brain was just trying to get around what was happening throughout the entire film, and I don't want to spoil the ending, but you do find out what's going on at the end.
Well, I think we could get onto the ending in a bit now, because I think we've pretty much said everything that we can without spoiling anything. So, before we get into spoilers, if you want to just summarise, would you recommend the movie, stuff like that?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend the movie. It's one of those movies that maybe you might want to wait a year or maybe two. Just let's see where other films go with these actors and stuff like that, and if, I'm not saying Star Wars will flop, but if the actors do flop, just refer back to this film and say they can do good, they can pull off good performances. I would say that this film is going to be a cult classic for the 2010s, and I think it may even be, in retrospect, be considered to be one of the best ones of the last 10 or so years. But at the moment, not many people know about it. It'll build up over time. It'll snowball, and it will become a brilliant movie in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I was saying earlier as well about the whole cult classic thing. I definitely think it's got it in it to be like that. Now I've watched it, it's definitely probably one of my favourite films from this year. Just checking it. Yeah, it was released. It was actually released on my birthday, 21st of January. Wow. But yeah, I agree with that it needs time to settle. I think, well, I mean, it made double its budget back, so I mean, people went to see it. I think that Star Wars might be a way for it to get a bit more sort of coverage and a bit more notice when people are aware of the actors and they can refer back to this film. But if I'm going to summarise my thoughts on it before we get into spoilers, fantastic performances, perfect direction, great tone and pace to it, really sort of slow, methodical. It's definitely a slow build film, I would say. But I mean, wow, when you get to that ending, it's definitely a film that makes you think afterwards. I mean, I've seen this twice, but this was from ages back, and I still, you know, recall this movie and sort of well, I know it sounds so cliched, but the journey it took me on. But the experience I went through watching it, it's definitely lasted with me, and that's why I think it's probably, without doubt, in my top 10 from this year, possibly even my top 5 if I were to make a list for it.
I'd go top 3 for me.
Wow, that high?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, towards the end of this year, we'll probably do a video of our top 5 films each for this year, so I'm sure that this film's definitely going to make it in there for the both of us. But that was our spoiler-free section, so now we're going to go into spoilers.
Oh, goody.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot to talk about, and most of it, to be honest, comes towards the ending. But we'll, if you want to kick us off at where you want to start off with this spoiler talk.
I want to kick off with what I was referring to earlier.
Okay.
This is more of a theory, if anything, but I think this is what the film was trying to convey across. So we have the 3 main characters here. We have Ava, who is getting mixed up with Wally there.
Yeah, no, I was
Ava,
thinking that as well.
Ava, the like genetic human being, the cyborg type thing. I'm not actually quite sure how to word it. AI, artificial intelligence. We have Caleb as the young plucky dude, and Oscar Isaac's Nathan. I think Caleb was meant to show the human side of humanity, and Oscar Isaac's character was meant to side the robotic side of humanity, and Ava was meant to sit in the middle as the character to conflict between the two. So, just putting it out there, but I feel like they were trying to go from that as a moral standpoint in the film. So it would be the conflicting emotions of Oscar Isaac's character being stone cold. You have to follow these rules. This must happen. This must happen. This must happen. I've created this with this intelligence because it makes sense. Whilst Caleb's coming in with all these emotions and all these kind of distractions and things that complicate the whole process for Oscar Isaac's character, and that may be how things are going on in Ava's mind. That's just my theory I'm putting out there.
Well, we see Nathan's relationship with Ava and sort of how it's strained. I mean, you always get that sense. You get those great scenes between Caleb and Ava where they're sort of talking. He's talking to her as she's behind the glass, and they have a power cut, and then she says, "You've got to get me out of here. Don't trust anything Nathan says." And you get those moments. So it's interesting on a second watch because you think, how far back did she already have this notion in her head of this was the plan that she was going to try and hatch? But I think I can agree with you there on that whole sort of balance of morality and their standpoint, because you're right, Nathan sort of very much does talk numbers, doesn't he, and sort of the logistics of like making stuff. And I think there's if I'm remembering it right, I think there's even a scene where he talks about the whole construction of Ava in the first place and this whole line of robotics he's been working on.
I think it's also everything that he does in life, because when you see him, the first scene you see of him, he is exercising, he is keeping his body and his mind in perfect physical condition, whilst Caleb's just kind of rocking up, very relaxed, doesn't really know what's going on, whilst Oscar Isaac's character knows everything that's happening, including the conversations between Caleb and Ava. He knows about them. He knows about all of them, so yeah. And I mean,
apart from the peak physical condition where, with his alcohol consumption, more or less every night, he is sort of like, he's almost like a rock star, really. I think he sees himself that way as well. I think sees himself as this guy who's like the pinnacle
untouchable
of human thought and mind and absolute perfection to actually create proper artificial intelligence. And I think he's just sort of loving life, really, isn't he? I mean, there's that line towards the beginning of the film where I think, if I'm remembering it rightly, Caleb sort of walks in, finds all the empty beer bottles and stuff, and says, "Oh, did you have a party here last night?" And he was like, "What party?" And then you sort of already get the sense that, his lifestyle. And we haven't really touched on this either as well, but Nathan, how he sort of creates this army of female, all the artificial intelligence that he creates are female, and there's this really uneasy feeling that he's sort of using them in certain ways, and that's basically confirmed at the end, isn't it, where he finds the closet of them all and there's loads in there, and that really disturbing scene where one of them's, I don't know if she's trapped behind glass and she's trying to get out, and she's banging so hard on the door with her hands that her arms just shatter and she just falls to pieces. I mean, it's very clear that Nathan's not a good guy, but I know before we even hit record, you're not quite sure on where to stand with him at the end. You don't know whether to sort of empathise with him a little bit, or if not empathise, but sort of see his thought process and see where he's coming from.
Yeah. No, and it's difficult because even though we think Oscar Isaac's character is evil, horrible, immoral, he was right.
Yeah.
About Ava, about what she was going to do. He said, "Don't get too attached to her. All she wants to do is escape. She doesn't actually care about you." And he was perfectly right. And he may have known all along because he programmed her, and maybe he saw that in her immediately. He knew it because of the other artificial intelligences trying to escape. But that's the whole human side of it. We don't listen to people. We don't listen to this perfect, We don't listen to Oscar Isaac's kind of robotic, very methodical way of thinking, and that's how Ava, in the end, eventually just gets up and leaves.
Yeah, and with these three characters, I think they do have their not pros and cons, but I do think that they have two sides to them that you can sort of get behind them on one, but then I mean through Ava throughout the film, you empathise with. She's meant to appear that way. She's meant to
Yeah.
appear the victim, and you want to see her escape. You want to see her get out of this, and you almost want to see her just walk off hand in hand with Caleb
But
into the beautiful sunset. And it doesn't quite end that way.
in
So
the
I
end,
mean,
you don't want her to escape. You want her to rescue Caleb.
yeah.
But she just kind of looks at him and just walks off, and he's
Yeah, some context of the scene. Obviously, this is spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, you just don't care about spoilers. She gets out. She basically orchestrates this entire plan to get Caleb to rescue her. She
they use
I
a
don't-
power
it's-
cut. I'll
she's with
explain,
another
so I got it
artificial.
here.
Okay.
They use a power cut to get out of her cell.
Yeah.
Nathan then knocks Caleb unconscious whilst they're trying to escape, and as Nathan begins to kind of try and take Ava back to the cell to lock her up again, he gets stabbed by Ava, and
Yeah.
Nathan dies and bleeds out. And when Caleb wakes up again, all the doors are back online, everything's gone back online, and Ava is on one side of the door, and Caleb is on the other. Ava can open the door if she wants, but the other option is her just walking out the door back out into the outside world.
Yeah,
which
and
is what
with
she's always wanted.
And with that scene, do you think that... Because there is that moment where she just stops at the doorway and turns back to him, and there's that brief moment where it looks like, do I let him out or do I leave him in there? Do you think that her sort of concept of humanity is tainted by Nathan, and she thinks that no one can be redeemed or is truly good, and that's why she leaves him in there? Or do you think that just she's so hell-bent on freedom that she doesn't care about humans?
I think maybe she took on the advice that Nathan did instead of taking on the advice that Caleb did. Caleb said, okay, I'm going to break you out. We're going to go off together romantically into the sunset. And Oscar Isaac's character probably said to her, or said to maybe Caleb's character in the presence of her, saying, don't get remotely attached. All they do is like break your heart and stuff like that. And maybe she's thinking, yeah, I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to risk... I mean, she's just killed someone. He may tell someone in the outside world. She can't take that risk. She has to leave him there.
Yeah, and with the ending as well, really this is sort of the only... It's not a problem I have with the film, but I do think that it's sort of like glossed over at the ending. The helicopter arrives at the place to pick up Caleb, and Ava basically runs out to the helicopter pilot. We don't hear the discussion that she has with the pilot, and they just sort of like go, okay, and
Fly
then they
off.
take her on board and fly off. So it seems a bit convenient that they arrive there for Caleb, and they don't inquire where he is or go in and check where he is and get him on the helicopter. They just sort of take this stranger with them on the helicopter, and then you get a brilliant shot that I think could be interpreted in many ways. You see Ava try and integrate herself into human lifestyle, into the society, and she just sort of stands awkwardly in the middle looking around, and then I think she sort of like walks off the camera, doesn't she? She like looks back over her shoulder and then walks back. So I
Yeah,
don't know
it's-
if that's interpreted how she wants to try and go back to where she came from, or she wants to try and rescue Caleb, or if it's just a case that she's walking to another spot. I think that the ending, particularly the ending shot, is definitely one that could be interpreted in many ways. I think.
A theme that's running through the entire film the whole way is the whole, is she human, is she not, does she have dreams, does she not, and one of the things she says is something that I've always wanted to do was go and see a crowded street, people crossing a road and stuff like that, and that's where the film ends, with her on the crowded street, and I interpret her walking off screen as her walking off into new life. She's not going to think about like Caleb, she's just going to leave him there. There's no way of her actually getting back out there without explaining the situation. So
Yeah.
she just has to get on with it, and she is artificial intelligence. but she's made her choice. She's going to stick to that. She isn't going to change her mind. So,
and I do think this is a film as well that probably only gets better with multiple viewings, because I'm sure that every time you watch this film you could sort of pick up on something you missed the first time, or maybe have an entirely different thought process on it and how you think it pans out at the end. But before we close out now, I always like doing this. If there's any problems you have with the film or any particular favourite moments, if you want to go first, Tate.
my problem, just like The Martian, is random 80s music being inserted where it really shouldn't be. And there was a dance scene midway through the movie, and it may have been added in there for creepiness. I really don't care. It did not fit in there with the movie. I don't care whether it was meant to be creepy and that fits in the movie. No, it didn't fit in at all. It was terrible.
See, I think it did, because we get this sense that Nathan himself is this sort of rock star. He likes to drink, he likes to party. So, and it's really creepy as well that we find out later on that one of these artificial intelligence he uses her in a number of despicable ways. And, I mean, they've choreographed this entire dance number with each other, so you know that he's been making her do this over and over and over again to this song, and I don't know, it's just uneasy. You see Caleb's reaction, it's sort of like jaw open, like, what am I witnessing?
You already know that he's orchestrated this entire thing. That's just adding to the runtime, I think.
I don't know.
Okay,
I think
we have 5 minutes of filler here. We don't have enough footage. What are we gonna do?
See, I didn't see it in that way. I guess it's a moment of levity, I suppose, because it is humorous, but even when you sort of, well, I know you're not laughing, but when I'm laughing at it, it is that uneasy laughing, because you know sort of the underlying themes behind it and what's been going on between Nathan and I forgot the name. I'm going to check the name of the Kyoko, isn't it? I think he dances with. So yeah, I still got that uneasy sense from it. It is humorous though, to see this whole staged choreographed dance, but I get what you mean. That is the scene that stands out to me that's most tonally inconsistent with the rest of it, so I completely buy that, but I don't know, it wasn't a problem for me. I still think it played into Nathan's weirdness and creepiness, especially when you get to the ending, and then if you watch it a second time right from that moment.
It looked like a weird film if you started the film with a dance.
Yeah.
Was there anything you didn't like?
Problems wise for me, it was really just the ending. As I said with like the helicopter pilot, I think it was. I don't want to say the ending was rushed, because I mean maybe it was done with the intention of leaving it up to the audience, which I usually resent in films like this, where it's like the director just thinks like, oh, I can't think of anything compelling, or just let the audience make up their minds. I'm looking at Stanley Kubrick with 2001: A Space Odyssey for that one.
The ending for me, whilst I was sat on the plane, I didn't do exactly the same thing in the cinema, but I was sat next to my dad and we were watching it exactly at the same time. We both had the same reaction. We start off by, as soon as she got murdered, our jaws dropped. Like, as soon as Nathan got murdered by Ava, our jaws dropped. As soon as she looks in, we're going, okay, that's fine. They're going to escape. It's going to be happy. As soon as she turns, he started banging on the gas. We're like, no. Hands on head, screaming no on this plane. We weren't screaming, but we were just like, we could say, no, 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 no. Turn around, turn around. She gets to the helicopter. No, turn around. You still have time. Speaking to helicopter pilot, notice something. And then she flies off and she's like, no, no.
Yeah, and I think it was sort of an unnecessarily cruel ending for Caleb. I don't know if his character particularly deserved that. So on the one hand, I think
that's the whole point of the film.
Yeah, on the one hand, I'm thinking his character didn't deserve that, and Ava's a complete and utter bitch for locking him in there, and I hope she dies in a horrible, mangled mechanic mess. But then on the other hand, like when we've sort of like been breaking it down throughout this review, I think it does play upon those themes, and I think it does add a level of complexity to the character of Ava. So I'm sort of torn on it, but I mean, don't watch this film expecting a happy ending. No. I mean, I guess it's a happy ending for Ava. I mean, she escapes and she integrates herself into...
You don't like her at the end. You like her at the start.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, so I guess a character does have a growth. I think maybe that sort of our perceptions on the ending and what we're expecting is because of typical Hollywood and typical story structure. You expect a happy ending at the end. You expect them both walking off happily ever after into the helicopter and flying off into the distance, but you don't get that with that film. So I don't know if I can say it's a problem I have with it, because it's, you know, it's a very bold choice and it's a very different choice to most films we get. I don't know, so I'm sort of torn on that. But if I'm going with a favourite moment, I know you were predicting it was going to be the dance scene. That's one of them, but my favourite one is where Caleb is about to hatch the plan, and he's having this exchange of dialogue with Oscar Isaac, and already he's trying to get Oscar Isaac completely and utterly drunk, so that he can go about with his plan at night time. And you know that Oscar Isaac knows. He knows what Caleb's planning from the very beginning, and sort of Caleb's offering him vodka, I think, and drink. And he's like, oh no, I had a night of drinking last night. Today's my detox. I'm just going to have healthy food, nothing but water. And he's like, no, but come on, have a vodka. And he's like, no, I don't want it. You drink it if you want. And you can see the doubt in Caleb's face. And then that builds to my favourite bit, where Caleb lies to... I'm trying to remember it because, as I say, it's been a while since I've seen it. But he's lying about his what he spoke to Ava about. And Oscar Isaac plays it right there on recording, right in front of him, and you just see Caleb's reaction like, shit, he knows. And that moment, because their relationship was perfectly developed and built, even from their uneasy sort of meeting at the start, right up until that moment, it was completely earned. So that was probably my favourite moment, because that was genuinely nail-biting stuff, at that moment, because you didn't know what was going to happen. So do you have a particular favourite moment, or...?
Mine's the ending. Mine is the ending. Even the helicopter bit. I just think it built up so much suspense up to that point, and then suddenly just dropped it all on you, and you're just like, okay, now we know what's happening. Now we know what Ava's true intentions were. But just one final note that I'd like to leave on.
Yep.
Next time you watch the film, people who have watched the film before, just see who instigates every single plan to get Ava out. See who's the one who is in control at all points. Who is the one who suggests. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and, you know, I'll echo that totally, and that's what I think the multiple viewings comes into it, because I think that your opinion of that could change on each viewing. I think so. To summarise again, definitely one to watch. One of the best films of this year, and probably in the last few years I can remember. Really nice sort of low budget, smaller film that I think everyone should see, because I think it stands right up there, not just in sort of in acting, but also in the story and the complexity of it all. I think that it's one that everyone should see. If you're into sci-fi, if you're into thrillers or anything, I mean, if you love all the artificial intelligence kind of movies and robotics stuff, you've definitely owe it to yourself to watch this. I think it's been out for a while on Blu-ray and DVD, so definitely pick it up. One to watch, and I guess you feel exactly the same way, right?
I'm gonna go buy DVD next time.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it would look great on Blu-ray as well. I mean, the effects and stuff. There's some really beautiful cinematography in this film as well. But yeah, Ex Machina. You're definitely going to see this probably on our list for top films of this year when we get to it towards the end of this year. So yeah, that was our review on Ex Machina. Be sure to rate, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought of the movie, if you've seen it, if you haven't seen it. You can find us at Facebook on facebook.com/cinemasavvy. We're on Twitter at cinema_savvy, and we're also at letterbox.com/cinema_savvy, where you can find a list of all the films we've reviewed on the channel so far. Next week for our main show will be 007 Spectre, the latest Bond movie. This is probably the biggest film of this month. As I said, like November's Hunger Games and then December into Star Wars.
The people who don't like Hunger Games and don't like Star Wars and don't like Jurassic World, this will probably be the biggest film of the year for them.
Definitely. I mean, Skyfall was a huge hit. I don't want to go into too much detail now because I want to save it for our review, but I've never been a huge Bond fan, especially the Daniel Craig ones.
I'm a huge Bond fan.
I've currently been working my way through all of them, actually. I'm up to the Roger Moore ones. I was hoping to get all of them watched in order before the new one, but there's There's a lot of Bond movies. That's a lot of hours, and we're only 2 days away, I believe, before the premiere. So probably not going to get them all done in that time. But that should be definitely one to watch. So until then, check back for that, and thank you very much for listening.